One of the high points in the life of King David, most of us know a lot about his life, was when he laid out the plans for the temple that he wanted to build. But God said, "You're not going to build it. Your son's going to build it." And he organized the funding for it. This happened on a day in the latter season of his life. And as he looked back on his life at that moment, he thought about the fact that God had brought him through so much. He started out just as the youngest boy in the family, sort of the runt. His brothers kind of jealous of him when he succeeded. There wasn't good relations there. His dad overlooked him, and yet God picked him out and said, "You're going to be the king after Saul." And so David then went on to defeat Goliath, and became one of the best generals in Saul's army. In fact, he became so good as a general in Saul's army that Saul began to be suspicious of him, and then he began to be paranoid about him. And so began this season of persecution where Saul was chasing David, trying to kill him, had the whole army out trying to kill him. And time after time, David barely escaped, just escaped by a whisker, and his life was spared. And then after Saul died, David was elevated to be the king, and then he had all kinds of victories, won all kinds of battles. He's looking back at this point in his life, toward the end of his life, and he's bringing this gift, and he's thinking about what God's done for him, and he's thinking about the fact that even though he sinned so terribly by murdering Uriah, his faithful servant, yet God still forgave him, still left him on the throne, still gave him descendants. And so David comes to this point in his life where he looks at all of this, and he's encouraged the people to give. He's given a big amount of money. He's encouraging the leaders and the people. They've done it, and he's just so happy. This had to be one of the happiest days in his life. He was so grateful to God. So his heart just overflows with this expression. God, yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory. He says something to that effect. You own everything. You're the king of everything. And then in the middle of his praise, he comes out with this statement, this humble statement. He says in 1 Chronicles 29, "Who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this?" Now look what he says here. Everything comes from you, Lord, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. He goes on to say this, "We are foreigners and strangers in your sight, as were all our ancestors, and our days on earth are like a shadow without hope. Lord our God," he finishes this prayer, "Lord our God, all this abundance that we've provided for building you a temple for your holy name, all of this comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you." All of it comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you. The title of my message today is On Loan from God. On loan from God. David recognized, and God wants us to recognize, that God owns everything that we have, and we are simply stewards of his property. God is the owner. All this abundance, God, it came from you, and it belongs to you. Not that it did belong to you before you gave it to me, but since you gave it to me, it still belongs to you. And so David says this in Psalm 24, sort of expanding it. This idea that God is the owner, he expands it, and he says, "The earth is the Lord's." Now you see how much wider that is. That's not just my stuff is the Lord's, but the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. The world and all who live in it, because he founded it upon the seas, and he established it upon the waters. Don't let that upon the seas and upon the waters throw you. The point here is he founded it. He established it. God owns it all, very simply, because he made it all. And God, this idea of God as owner, flows intuitively from the truth of God as creator. He owns it because he made it. And by the way, he owns it because he sustains it in existence every second of every day. This whole world exists. You exist. I exist because of God. And so this is so clear from the scripture. This is what David recognized. Even though he was very wealthy and he'd given a lot of money to God, yet he said, "God, you own it all, but God allows us to use it." Isn't he nice? God allows us to use it. We have to be clear when we say God gave us something. We have to be very clear about how to understand that word gave and what sense we understand it. You know, God gave the land to Israel, and it uses that terminology. He promised it to Abraham. He brought Israel to it, and he gave it to them. And they could live on it, and they could raise crops and livestock, and they could earn money, and they could even become wealthy. And they could even hand it on to their children and their grandchildren, but God never relinquished his ownership of that land. And so he makes this statement quite pointedly in the chapter 25 of Leviticus, which, by the way, is the chapter that describes the Jubilee, the year of release, the year where all debts are canceled. Every 50 years, all debts were canceled, and all land that had been sold is returned to its original owners. It's very important. The land was returned. And here's the rationale. Leviticus 25 says this: the land must not be sold permanently. Why? Because the land is mine, God says, and you are but aliens and my tenants. You remember David said in his prayer of thanksgiving, we are strangers and aliens before you. He recognized that. See, God says the land is mine. He never gave up total ownership of the land. He just loaned it to them. The things that we have are on loan from God. There's a man in England called the Duke of Westminster. His family name is Grosvenor. And this family, the Grosvenor family, goes back, way back, beyond back in the day, because the Grosvenor family is one of the knights that came over from Normandy during the 1066 Norman invasion of Britain. I know I say 1066, some of you are passing out already, it's so long ago. And so, just what I'm trying to get you to see is centuries this family has been there. And at some point in the next century, the then king gave the Grosvenor family a huge section of land on the Thames River, kind of swampy, maybe wasn't worth that much. But today, that is like in the center of London. And not just the center of London, but it's some of the most fashionable, expensive properties in all of London. Belgravia, Kensington, places like that. And the Duke of Westminster still to this day owns most of the property in central London, this one family. And they were able to do that because they have a mantra in their family. Now, most of the great landed estates were broken up 100 years ago, but the Duke of Westminster was able to keep his property intact because they had a mantra. He passed it on to his son and the son to son. It's been for hundreds of years. And here's the mantra: lease, never sell. Lease, never sell. So they lease their properties, but it's always theirs. Can I kind of stretch this and say, God leases, but he never sells. Everything we have is on loan from God. God is the owner of everything we have. Our car, our house, our bank accounts, our savings, our investments, our 401ks, our IRAs, our 403bs, our XYZs, our WXYZs, all of the alphabet soup that goes up through retirement accounts, all of it's God's. Our family, ourselves. Well, how can you say that's the case? Well, God made me. Everything good I have came from his hand. And so it's his, but God allows us to use his stuff so that we can live, so we can be blessed, indeed, so we can enjoy it. Paul, speaking to Timothy, says that God richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, but he never relinquishes ownership. All the stuff we have really belongs to him. He is the owner. So what does that make us? Well, it makes us renters. It makes us tenants, as the scripture says in Leviticus. I'll put it another way. It makes us stewards. That's an old-fashioned word. They used to use it for flight attendants, It used to be called stewardesses. Anybody remember those days? What are they called now? Flight attendants. That's right. It'll change. Just wait. A couple of years, it'll be something else that's more PC. But steward is an old-fashioned word. We're stewards of God's property. And a steward, by definition, I got this from Webster's dictionary, is one who manages another person's property, finances, or affairs. I think we know this. one who manages another person's property, finances, or affairs. So he or she takes care of, administrates, is in charge of the wealth and property of another individual. So by definition, the resources that stewards handle do not belong to them. I think I can get you to understand this if I bring it down to our retirement portfolios. You know, we're invested in the 401ks and the 403bs and all that stuff. And if you're wise, and I hope you are, especially if you're younger, if you're wise, you're putting money aside for later. Can I get an amen? You think that's a good idea? Put money aside for later, yeah? And boy, if you're in your 20s, start now. Just get in the habit. And I could just Dave Ramsey the thing, okay? But what you do is you're giving this money. It's taken out of your paycheck, hopefully, and you pay it, and you're giving that money to somebody. Now it's a corporation, but there's a manager. There's people who manage that, and the thing you keep in your mind is that is still your money. It's in their hands, and they're dealing with it, but it's your money. How happy would you be if you found out that all that you sent to your 401k, the manager went on vacation with it? No, I don't think that would make you very happy. So the question I want to pose to us today as we think about this, that on loan from God, thinking about how David saw all that he had, how do we view our possessions? Do we have an owner mentality, or do we have a steward mentality? So I want to look at these two ideas, an owner mentality or steward mentality. Now, an owner mentality goes something like this. It's mine, I worked for it, I earned it, and I control it. And in a sense, that's true. We did earn it. I'm not trying to say that we didn't do anything, sat there and sipped on Cokes and money showed up in our bank account. I admire the way that people work, and they work hard. But that kind of degenerates into, I decide what I do with my money. That's an owner mentality. I decide what I do with my money. Now, by contrast, a steward attitude goes something like this. It's all God's. He gave it to me. Well, I worked. Yeah, David said, all this comes from your hand, but this stuff that he gave, he won in battle. He put his life at risk. He went out there and did the deal and gained money. But he still said it came from your hand. Think about this. Well, you say, I've got a job. Yeah, but who gave you the job? Well, I came up with good ideas. Who do you think gave you the ideas? This is a steward mentality. God gave me strength to work, to get ideas, to earn income, and I am responsible for how I use it. That's why we have titles and deeds, and we care for it. We take care of it, and we don't waste it. But it belongs to God. And He says how He wants me to use it. This is the biggest difference. I decide what I want to do with my money. That's an owner mentality. God just tells me how He wants me to use it. That is a steward mentality. Now, what I want to caution you about is what I call attitude drift, all right? We start out knowing that our blessings have come from God. That it's God's, that it's come from Him. But something happens over time. The longer we have it, the easier it is to forget who gave it to us in the first place and who it belongs to. And so we can shift from a steward mentality to an owner mentality. Now, I'll give you a homework assignment. I know you're so excited, you were anticipating. I hope it gives me a homework assignment. So here's your homework assignment. Deuteronomy 8, if you want to dig more, don't worry about it. I'm not going to call you and say, did you do your homework? I'm your pastor, not your mom. But if you want to study more, go read Deuteronomy chapter 8, because it's all about attitude drift. And he tells them, you remember how the Lord brought you out of the wilderness. Remember how He provided for you. And do not forget, when you are living in a land of plenty, and when you are living in cities you didn't put up, and houses you didn't build, and vineyards you didn't cultivate, and you're reaping crops you didn't sow. And when everything's going great, year after year after year, don't forget. Otherwise you might become proud, and your heart will say, my hand and the strength of my arm has gotten this for me. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to create wealth and so fulfills His covenant. What's Moses describing? Deuteronomy 8, attitude drift. It's the kind of thing that happened to a couple of guys I know about, Harry and Lloyd. Harry and Lloyd are the protagonists in an epic American story called Dumb and Dumber. So let's take a look at what happened to Harry. Well, I got to preface. Hang on, don't roll it yet. So if you don't know the story of Harry and Lloyd, they're carrying a briefcase to someone in Aspen, Colorado, and they don't know what's in it. Then they get to Aspen, they're broke. They're living rough. Then they find out that the briefcase contains $5 million in cash. And so they decide they're going to use a little of it. Let's see what happens.
Here's the plan. We borrow a few bucks, just a small loan from the briefcase, and we find ourselves some reasonable lodging. It's a good plan. And we'll keep track of all the money we spend with IOUs. We'll be meticulous, right down to the last penny. Whatever we borrow, we pay back. We're good for it. Where's our bond?
This is the Hotel Danbury Presidential Suite, gentlemen. Normally reserved for royalty, visiting dignitaries, illustrious stars of stage and screen. We have shortly coming the Emperor and Empress of Japan. And of course, Princess Charles and I, when they were together, used to frequent the hotel constantly.
We'll take it!
Well, I would say these guys are not being good stewards. I would say they have an owner mentality rather than a steward mentality. Now look, okay, it's an extreme example, all right, but you get the point. And I wanted to provoke us into asking this question of ourselves: who owns and controls the finances in our life? Who owns and controls the finances in our life? You know, some people claim the lordship of Christ over their lives, but they still have an owner attitude. It's mine, I made it, I'm going to decide what I do with my money. And I have to say, if that's the case with you, my brother or sister, then I humbly submit to you that Jesus is not really in control of your life. You are. You know, one person said it this way: if Jesus isn't the Lord of our bank account, then he's not the Lord of very much. And so my challenge to us is, let's allow God to be what he really is, the owner of our resources, and give him control of those resources. Now, there's a lot of ways in which we can know that God's in control of our resources, but I think one of the major signs of God being in control of our finances is our giving, and particularly our tithing. It shows what's first in our lives. You know, that said in one of the movie All the President's Men, Follow the Money. It's very fascinating. You can tell the priorities in people's lives by following what they spend. And if nothing goes to God out of our finances, then God is not first in our lives. He's somewhere lower down the chain. So I want to take the minutes we have left and talk a little bit about tithing. I want to answer the question, what is the tithe? And then I want to answer the question, why does God want us to tithe? So, what is the tithe? It's a mathematical term, okay? It means 1/10 or 10%. I'm going to put it this way: it's regular and proportionate giving. Regular and proportionate giving. Now, Paul said to the Corinthians about their giving, he said this: on the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income. So here's the regular part. On the first day of the week, that's the regular. As they receive income, then according to that schedule, he wants them to give. Now, most of us, I think the vast majority of us, receive our income on some kind of scheduled basis. Our paycheck doesn't come haphazardly. It comes once a week or twice a month or maybe once a quarter, but there's a regular rhythm to the way that we receive our income. And what Paul is saying is, let your giving to God be in that same regular rhythm. It's not haphazard giving. It's not once in a while. It's not when I feel moved, okay? Not the tithe. Now, there's other kinds of giving where we do feel moved, but the tithe is not one of those. It isn't really always emotional, you know? Instead, I want to say it's very deliberate and premeditated giving. I would rather be guilty of premeditated giving than guilty of a premeditated crime, Thinking about it, making it a part of our regular financial schedule. That's what tithe means. It's regular and then it's proportionate. Paul says, in keeping with your income. It's a percentage. Now, that's a mathematical definition of tithe. What is the tithe? It's regular and proportionate giving. Let me give you what I'll call a moral definition of the tithe, and that is this. The tithe is God's property. The tithe is God's property. Leviticus 27:30 says, a tithe of everything from the land belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. A tithe of everything from the land belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. In other words, the tithe is His specifically. Rick, I thought you said everything was His. It is. The earth is the Lord's, everything in it. Yeah, everything we have belongs to Him. But He lets us keep and use most of it. To care for our needs, so we can eat and drink and be clothed, so we can help other people with their needs. But the tithe is God's property in this sense, that the tithe represents that money which God has given us for the sole purpose of giving it back to Him. I want to read that again. I want you to remember this. The tithe represents the money God has given us for the sole purpose, only one, and that is that we give it back to Him. From time to time, people will come to me and they'll say, Rick, I want you to give this envelope to that person. I don't want them to know that the recipient's name is on it, but there's no return name. They say, I want this to be anonymous. I don't want them to know that it's come from me, but I want you to give it to them. And when I grab the envelope, I can tell that it's got money. You know that about money in an envelope. It kind of has a squishiness to it. You go, ooh, yeah. That's why you should never send cash through the mail, because people go, oh, there's cash in there. And so, I want you to give it to them. Now, and so I'll go and do it and say somebody wants to bless it, and they open it up and there's 20s in there and they're crying and it's awesome. Now let me just do a hypothetical for you. You come to me one day and you say, Rick, I have a spongy envelope for you, and I want you to take this spongy envelope and I want you to give it to that person over there. I say, okay, I got it. So I take your spongy envelope. Instead of going to that person, I walk out the door and I go and buy something nice with it. Would you like that? Why not? Because you gave them that money for the sole purpose of giving it away. That's why you gave it to me. And so most of you said, no. In fact, that bugged you. Whoa, don't do that, Rick, or I'll do something bad to you. Can I say to you that that's how God feels about the tithe? Because He's given it to you, not for yourself, but for you to give back to Him. And this is why Malachi, in confronting the people who were doing this, he said, will a person rob God, yet you rob me? This is God speaking. You're robbing God. They go, what? How do we rob God? What do you mean? That's impossible. And the prophet answers, in tithes and offerings. You remember it said in Leviticus, the tithe belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Holy doesn't mean there's angels around it singing and it's glowing with the glory of God. Holy means that it is set apart specifically for God and His purposes. That's what holy means. And that's why the tithe is holy. So there's two definitions of tithing. A mathematical definition, it's 10%, regular and proportionate. And then a moral definition, it's God's property. So you could ask the question, well, why does God ask us to tithe? Why does He want us to do this? Well, here's three reasons why God wants us to tithe. First of all, through tithing, God funds His work on earth. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, it says in Malachi, into the place of ministry, so that there may be food in my house. Now, food in my house means provision for ministry. God uses His people to provide for His work on earth. He involves us. He allows us to be partners in His work on the earth. And this has always been God's way. I mean, right at the beginning with Israel, when they built that elaborate tent called the tabernacle for Him to meet with them, the people brought their money. Now, God had gotten it to them in Egypt, but it had been in their hands, and they gave it to Moses, and he put it to work to build the tabernacle. The same goes for Solomon's temple. And the same goes for the ongoing ministry in the whole Old Testament after the temple was built. They brought the animals and the other goods. They supported the priests and the Levites, enabling them to give full time to ministry. That's just how God has done it. And not just Old Testament, but New Testament. You know, Jesus ate most of his meals as he was on the road those 3 years. He ate most of his meals because somebody else paid for them. Well, I thought he divided the loaves and the fish by the sea. Yeah, he did that 2 times. But Jesus didn't eat just 2 times. He ate 3 times a day. And how did he eat? He didn't just clap his hands and there was a burger, you know. There were people who financed Jesus' ministry. A lot of people don't know that. They think, well, he's the Son of God. It's just going to appear. That's not how he functioned. People gave money to Jesus to allow him and his apostles to travel the countryside and preach. It's the same thing with Paul's churches. This is how God funds his ministry. Well, I thought, why does God need to fund his ministry? It's not about the money. God doesn't need the money. God uses us to finance his work on earth, not because he must, but because he chooses to do so. It might seem odd to you. God gives us money and then asks us to give a portion of it back to him so that his work on earth can go forward. I mean, come on, Rick, that's inefficient. Why not just skip the middleman? Here's point number 2. Because through tithing, God tests us. Through tithing, God tests us. God wants to know some things about us. He wants to know if we really believe he's our source. He wants to know where he is in our lives. And you see this so clearly in the story of Abraham. When God asked Abraham to give up his son, and he was willing to do it until God stopped him at the last minute. And then listen to what God said to Abraham. He said, "Now I know that you fear me, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Now, this is an amazing statement for God to make. Now I know. As if God is saying, I didn't know it before until I saw you do this. But now I know that you fear me because you did not withhold from me. Now God knew it because he saw what Abraham did. He saw what he gave. God appreciates words, and he appreciates sentiment, and he appreciates intention, but God is also from Missouri. He says, show me. Tithing is a heart test. It's spiritual heart test. It locates our devotion. Locates our devotion. Locates what's first in our lives. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It locates our faith. I mean, Abraham's giving was a great test of his faith in God. And the book of Hebrews tells us, in commending him for his faith, that he believed that God could raise his son from the dead if that's what needed to happen, but God was going to keep his promise. So through tithing, God tests us, but I'm going to flip that. Through tithing, we test God. Test me in this. Let's see that scripture. Malachi 3:10, this is God speaking. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing you won't have enough room for it. Listen to me. We discover things about God when we tithe. Test me. Find out. See, that's why God tells us to try it. See what happens. It's a faith step. God makes a promise. He'll pour out blessings on us. I need to clarify here. Sometimes when I was a kid, I used to think that meant, well, I'm just going to be easy rich. That I'm never going to have any financial challenges. No, you can live in financial challenges and still be under the blessing of God. Margie and I discovered as we moved to UK and our income went in half, 50% pay cut. Woo! And then we were on a tight budget, baby. I mean, we recorded sodas. 1 Coca-Cola, March 1st, 1989. Chewing gum, rubber bands, everything. I wrote it down. It wasn't even a spreadsheet. It wasn't with a quill pen, though. It wasn't that long ago. Writing these numbers, keeping track of them. I mean, we were tight, but we were committed to tithe. No matter how tight it was, we were going to give God his portion. And I don't know how to tell you that you've heard this kind of story before, but God blessed us so amazingly when we lived in England. I mean, he gave us a house that was very un-British. It was very open plan, you know. British houses, not knocking it, and I think it's changed now, some years later, but back then, British houses, every room, the living room had a door, you closed it. The dining room had a door, you closed it. The kitchen had a door, you closed it. There wasn't a concept of an open plan. You know, now everything's open to the living room and this and that. Not the bathroom, it's not that open, but so that house was like such a haven for us. It was a gift from God that was the blessing of God. God was opening up some heavenly windows on us. And in so many ways, we were able to do this and able to do that. And I look back on it now, and I don't even know how we were able to do it. That's the blessing of God. See, God wants us to, I'm saying that through tithing, we test God. God wants us to see something about him. That he's a provider, that he's our source. He wants to prove it to us. And we set this process in motion through tithing. Malachi 3:10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house, and test me in this. I want you to notice this word, bring. Everybody say bring. Bring it. You have to bring it. You have to make a decision. You know, the tithe is bundled, all right? It's packaged into your paycheck, to your commission, to your profit. You have to pull it out. You have to decide to give it, okay? It's not going to grow angel wings and just fly out of your bank account by itself toward heaven. I'll say it another way. God never takes the tithe. He only receives the tithe, all right? Bring it is not the same as I'm coming for it. God will not pry it out of our hands. No, yes, no, yes, no, yes. God, listen, if God has to pry it out of our hands, then he doesn't have our hearts, which is the whole point. Our heart is more important to God than our money. And so, you know, I was praying for you this morning before the service, saying, God, help them to hear you more than me. And so let me challenge you with this. What's the Holy Spirit saying to you right now? You know, if you're already tithing, that's great. Bless you. If you're not, I would have challenged you to make a decision to start with some regular proportion of your income. Now, you know what we say at Faith Family Church, those who are regulars here, if you don't feel you can do 10%, then do some percent. I mean, if not 10, then do 5. If not 5, then do 2, and believe God and trust him to be able to move it up to 10%. But never give nothing. Give some percentage. It is a huge mistake to say, since I can't do everything, therefore I will do nothing. Since I can't give 10%, therefore I will give no percent. And I'm saying, why make it so binary? Why don't you give some percent? Start somewhere. It's a mistake to say, well, if I can't do the full 10, I'm cursed anyway. Don't go there. You know, I'm cautious about preachers who say, you're cursed if it's not 10%. 9.9, 9.5, 9.9, you're cursed. It's like, ooh, that's too legalistic for me. 10's not a legalistic number, okay? It's the only number we've got. It's a benchmark. Shoot for it. That's the most I can say from a New Testament standpoint. Whew, some of you say, well, I will add this, and this is free, meaning first service didn't get it. Some of you here, some of you watching, could be giving more than 10%. Some people love 10%. Is that all? I mean, if you make $1 million a year, guys, living on $900,000 a year is a lot different than somebody who makes $30,000 a year and lives on $27,000 a year. That's for free. You can take it or leave it. The other mistake I want to tell you, if you're struggling, I can't give, well, give some percentage. Well, if you say, okay, I want to tithe, and I intend to tithe when I have more money. No, you won't. No, you won't. I'm not saying you're an evil person. I'm just saying what Jesus said, that if you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much. And if you're unfaithful in little, you'll be unfaithful in much. That's an illusion to think I'll start when I have more money. That's an illusion. Bring it finally into the storehouse. The Old Covenant, the storehouse in the Old Covenant is the temple ministry, everything that goes on for Old Covenant ministry. The storehouse in the New Covenant, I'm going to put it this way. I believe the storehouse includes, but is not wholly restricted to, the church where you come to worship, where you're fed, where you're involved in serving God and others. And I'll say that to anyone who's watching online, but you're not a part of this church. Everything I'm saying about tithing, you really need to relate that to your own church. It includes it, you know. I say it this way because I don't, if you're concerned about our motives in this message, then give somewhere else. What matters to us is that you're givers, because that's your spiritual life. We'll trust God for what happens here. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a practical principle in tithing to your church. A case can be made for the local church being at least part of the storehouse metaphor. That's important too. The reason you're not sitting on knotty pine benches right now, which would make my sermons go about 5 minutes if that were the case, is because somebody gave to this church. Somebody who goes to this church gave to this. You understand, the lights are on for that reason. We're able to have staff to do ministry for that reason. But the spiritual principle of tithing is more important than the practical principle, because it's about your heart. And that's what we care about more than anything else. Let's bow our heads and pray. Holy Spirit, I am asking you, as I asked earlier this morning, to please speak to our hearts in a way that we can hear that it's you and it's the Father and the Son who are speaking to us, Lord. I pray you'd stir people's hearts with a new kind of faith, a new kind of courage to step out and step up in their giving to you, so that we keep our hearts completely for you, God. We don't want to just say you're tops. We don't want to just say you come first. We want to demonstrate it in the way we deal with the resources you have given us. And so help people, Lord God, to make that such an important decision. I pray for those who are listening and don't know Christ as their Savior. I pray that you would speak to their hearts right now. God says this, that he loves you so much that he sent his Son to die for your sins. He gave, we're talking about giving to God, he gave everything for us. Jesus gave his life for us, so that the wrong things we do, the sins we commit that separate us from God, could be forgiven. He did it freely. He didn't wait till you came to him. He did it before you even knew him. He loves you so much. And I want to give an opportunity as we're prayerful here right now. If you've never received Christ as your Savior, I'm telling you there is a place of forgiveness and relationship with Almighty God for you, if you'll just reach out and take it in faith. If you're a wayward Christian, he's still there for you. Stop running and come back home. And I'm going to lead us in a simple prayer of faith and commitment to Christ. I'm going to say the words. You just say them in your own mind. Just say them in your own heart. Make this prayer that I pray your prayer this morning. God's going to meet you and touch your life. Oh God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you that you sent your Son, whom you love, to die for my sins. Now God, I acknowledge that I've sinned. I've done wrong things. Please forgive me. Let Jesus come into my heart and take away my sin. God, make me new on the inside through your precious Holy Spirit. And I'll follow your Son for the rest of my life. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.